Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Chris Weidenbach, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Warrant Officer Cherie Theat. We warmly welcome the family of Private Edward John Bounds, whose story will be told shortly. We are honoured to acknowledge Air Chief Marshal Birender Singh Dhanoa, Chief of Air Staff, India, accompanied by Air Marshal Leo Davies, Chief of Air Force, Australia. We also welcome members of the Defence Force Chaplains College who are joining us this evening. We also acknowledge and welcome members of the Taree RSL sub-branch who are joining us today. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During the ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family, visitors and by students on behalf of Ettalong Public School from New South Wales. Can I ask you all please to stand and join in singing the National Anthem? Thank you, students, members, you may be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Edward Bounds. Edward John Bounds was born in 1892, one of 12 children of Thomas and Mary Bounds of Newcastle suburb of Cooks Hill in New South Wales. In the years before the war, Bounds worked on the railways as a carter and delivered milk to local businesses in Newcastle. He enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force in Newcastle in April 1916, after the Wallabies recruitment march had passed through town. After several months training at Maitland Showground, Bounds embarked for England with a reinforcement group for the 34th Battalion in September 1916. At Lark Hill Camp on the Salisbury Plains, the 34th Battalion trained as part of the newly raised 3rd Division under the command of Major General John Monash, becoming one of the most highly trained formations in the Australian Imperial Force. The 34th Battalion sailed for France in December 1916, entering the trenches in a relatively quiet nursery sector near the town of Armentières, where units new to the Western Front were sent to acquire the skills of trench warfare. Over the following months, the battalion actively patrolled no man's land and carried trench raids on German positions. The battalion participated in its first major action on the Western Front at Mézin, where on the 7th of June 1917, it succeeded in securing German positions after 19 underground mines were detonated beneath enemy positions. The night before the battle, Bounds was moving up the line through Plouchert Wood with his platoon when they were caught in a German gas bombardment. Bounds was evacuated through a number of aid posts and dressing stations, suffering from gas poisoning. He spent several weeks in hospital at the Le Tréport before returning to his battalion in August. He then participated in the bitter fighting of the Third Battle of Ypres, including the 9th Brigade's costly and unsuccessful attack on Passchendaele village on the 12th of October 1917. After this, Bounds was temporarily promoted to Lance Corporal and became No. 1 gunner in the 15th Platoon's Lewis gun section. Bounds remained in Belgium until March 1918, when the German army launched its spring offensive on the Somme. Russia's withdrawal from the war had freed up millions of German soldiers who were transferred to the western for a major offensive that intended to capture the city of Amiens and split the British and French armies along the Somme River. German troops succeeded in overrunning the British defences on the Somme and struck deep into Allied territory. Australian troops were rushed south to defend Amiens, with troops of the 34th Battalion being sent to hold the line alongside the British troops at Hangard Wood near the town of Villers-Bretonneux. On the 4th of April 1918, Bounds' platoon was holding up in the sunken road west of Villers-Bretonneux when German artillery searching for the Australian gun batteries began shelling their position. Bounds was mortally wounded by a piece of shell fragment and died several minutes later. He was buried in an oat field near where he died, but was reinterred after the war at Crucifix Corner Cemetery in Villers-Bretonneux. The men of the 15th Platoon were devastated by his loss. Their mate, Boundsy, was very popular in the company and a courageous man. He was 26 years old. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right, among more than 60,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Edward Bounds, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
ask you all please to stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening.